year. But I mean, I don't know. Anyway, it was just an interesting conversation. That even. Yes. Hello, sir. Welcome. Hola.
Hello.
Let's get married, Donka. Where am I sitting?
Wherever you want.
Pick a seat, any seat.
I'll sit next to Liana. I know she doesn't bite. So I'm full, right?
Not hard, at least.
Yeah.
Oh, we ate. Oh, that's where that came from.
Oh, behave, Dobby.
The King Rolling bread.
Yeah.
Yeah, check it out. You get your own, like the big.
That's when you share screen.
That would be my notification that my meeting is starting.
Guys go see.
You never know.
Is that a parking space?
Yes.
It's a prop.
No.
Is there anyone on there?
Christy.
Christy, I'm really trying to make you a panelist. Promise. Oh, this is painful on my end. That was one word.
Great.
Yeah?
Met a lot of people. And went out to dinner later with Kevin and all of his people. Yeah.
Nice.
Tie or no tie?
Kevin or
I-
Scott? Oh.
I was lamenting my wardrobe choice all night long.
It was
No tie, no
fine.
tie.
Should have worn a tie.
Oh, no tie.
I did not wear a tie. I wore a button up with a sweater. I was the only one. Everybody else was wearing at least a coat, if not a coat, and a tie.
Well, you went gorge formal and everyone else.
Good shoes on.
Olympia formal and Gordon formal is totally different, man. Totally different.
Kevin should include everyone in on that.
It's up. All right.
Now I know.
Well, you know what GHO says. Yeah, that.
There she is.
Oh, yay.
Hi.
We can't hear you.
Hi.
Okay, there we go.
There,
Yeah.
there.
Hi.
We can get.
Okay. You can call meeting to order.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry.
6:02.
Okay. Oh. You want me to?
You can get it.
Screen share sound. You want me to do the presentation? Or are you wanting, okay.
Is that Ben?
Okay. Should be going. So you guys asked for a deep dive into parking, like Liana said. I said, all right, let's do it. So here we go. We are going to talk a lot about parking, but we're really not going to talk about parking. What it's going to be about parking. So follow me. It's a PowerPoint. There's a video in there that's longer than I wanted it to be, but it really covers some important points. As usual, just kind of interrupt and we can chat whenever. But we're going to get into kind of what this parking problem is or has been in the past that other communities have faced and that we've all learned from. What solving the parking problem looks like or can look like. Video, the tragedy of the commons. Our efforts to solve parking, what our downtown parking system looks like, and then where we're going from here. The past perspectives on parking, it's a new phenomenon, just like cars are new. We're all still struggling with what this is. So I love this. It's a comic from the New Yorker from 1927. And it hits on two planning things. First thing is obviously parking. They're trying to figure out what to do with all these new Model Ts that are rolling around New York City. So the New Yorker said, well, let's just stack them on these ledges of the building. I love the ledges of the building because that's a zoning code requirement from New York. So they were worried about tall buildings just completely obliterating all the sky and creating the shadow, perpetual shade. So they had them stair step up at the top to provide that light in so the shadow wasn't as long. So they had this early experiment to say, we don't know what these big buildings are going to do. Let's make sure they have as little impact as possible. So they did that. And that's why the Empire State Building looks like it does. The Chrysler Building looks like it does because it was a regulatory requirement. Moving ahead just 50 years, we're looking at Houston. Two shots of Houston from the 1970s and the 20-aughts, I think. Houston's a really cool one too, because it's a city that's never had zoning. And so the market just plays out and it changes and it adapts with what the market says. So in the 70s, when cars were new and when all the commuters were new, property owners can make an easy buck by just turning their lot into surface parking. And so you've got a sea of parking lots that are just engulfing these buildings. And then that started to change as the New Yorker idea kind of crept in to say, okay, let's do parking garages where people can drive up to the top of the building instead of a crane lifting them up. Started building parking garages and filling those spaces in with green space or public spaces. So wild changes over a 30-year period, 40-year period in Houston. Again, that's not a lot of time between.
Well, that's a huge change for not very much.
Well,
Yeah.
When you say, yeah, those are parking lots, that is an interesting thing. But then I noticed that fast forward and it looks like somebody had the forethought to insist on green.
Right.
Or
Making
the-
green
yeah,
space.
Parks Department purchased it. I don't, who knows?
Yeah, that wasn't there. Usually it goes the other way.
Right.
Yeah, so in 1920s, they're wondering what to do with parking. 50 years later, 1970s, the market found a way to do it in Houston. Then the market changed it just 30 years later, and we're only 30 or 50 years away from the Houston on the left, right? Like, there's not a lot of time to learn the lessons to get the parking all right. But what we did learn is this is one way to think about how to regulate parking. And so how lax or stringent your upfront requirements are, whether you're going to require a whole bunch of parking to begin with, or just a few spaces, and then if building changes, you can require more spaces later. On the x-axis, on the y-axis, we're looking at that adaptive management. So if you want to be really hands-off, you don't want to say, oh, we'll just require some later. You want to require it all up front. If you have a capacity to be hands-on or really involved, then you can say we're requiring less now and we'll deal with the problems later when they come.
Yeah, that's it.
The things that go through a community's mind when they start establishing stuff like that, or like the agency staffing and budgetary capacity to adapt with those changes. Activity of the development market, whether there's construction happening that's threatening the existing parking supply, how much new parking you need based on the new developments, desire to preserve the existing building stock, existing parking over or under supply that's in there, presence of alternative parking suppliers. And that one's super important. I'll talk a little bit about that too. But if you have real estate developers who are building parking garages and making a buck from everybody who goes there to park, then they don't want you to require on-site parking because that
pulls money from them.
pulls money from them. So that's something we don't have. And then the level of service expectations, Scott, I'll prompt you for that. Like what your community wants to see when it parks or how close they want to be.
I spent a lot of time in Southern California, and going to park in front of your ultimate destination is a pipe dream. You can go there and might get lucky, maybe circle a few times, but know that you're going to walk a certain distance. So that's why I always say I have not a lot of patience for it. I had to walk 2 blocks,
Right.
but there was a parking space there.
Right. Well, even in, I mean, even closer than, yeah, I mean, I spent some time in Southern California and, you know, upstate New York, but over here, even in Vancouver, I had a meeting that I had to go to, and I parked a block and a half away, and that was the open spot, and I walked to it. It wasn't a big deal. It's just what you expect. But here, everybody switches park right in front of where they're going. But then they go somewhere else and they don't mind, because that's what happens there. It's the mindset of,
There's studies that show if you're forced to walk to your ultimate destination, now you put your eyeballs on somebody else's business, and you might walk in and spend something.
So as each community wrestles with these issues, their own ability and their own desires for how to deal with the parking problem, there's this economic theory that's kind of underneath this.
Next slide, please.
There we go. So the tragedy of the commons. So this is a video. It's a fun video. It's longer than I want, but it's necessary too. So how do we keep from becoming the New York that needed to put vehicles on top of the skyscraper, or the Houston that didn't have buildings for people to go to?
In the manors of feudal England, there were some constituent lands that were available for shared use. One of the types of these common lands were common pastures. The commoners were not their owners, but by tradition, they had the right to graze livestock upon them. Over time, the extent of common pastures shrank due to the process of enclosures. However, one could see a vast difference between commons and private lands. In 1833, British economist William Forster Lloyd asked, "Why are the cattle on a common so puny and stunted? Why is the common itself so bare worn? Why is it cropped so differently from the private lands? Imagine two pastured lands of the same size. One is a common pasture that is used by 10 peasants, and the other is divided into 10 identical lots, each used as a private pasture by one of the 10 different owners. Both pasture lands can feed up to 50 cattle in a year before being unable to regenerate crops. 5 cattle can be grazed upon each of the identical private lots. Private owners would like to graze more cattle per year upon their lots, but they know that if they would, there's a high risk that it would make their lots barren, such that no cow could be grazed upon them in the next year. The benefits of using the pastures for many years were higher than a one-off profit from allowing more cattle to graze upon them. Commoners who used the common pastures were no less competent. They also knew that no more than 50 cattle at a time should graze upon the common pasture. As long as there were fewer than 50 cattle grazing upon the common pasture, everything was fine. The cattle population grew, however, and at first the limit was reached, and then exceeded. One of the commoners, called Gilbert, thought to himself, "So far each of us has been grazing 5 cows upon the pasture, but now I have more cattle. Grazing another cow is a risk, because the pasture could turn barren. I should not do it then." Unfortunately, the commoners were influenced by different incentives than those affecting private lot owners. Gilbert was worried. How can I be sure that another commoner will not graze an extra cow? In such a case, I will not be able to use the pasture next year, as it will be barren, and at the same time my 6th cow will be less fed this year. If I do the right thing by not grazing the extra cow, not only will I save the pasture for next year, but at the same time I will save it for someone else this year. That is why I decided to bring an extra cow to the pasture. Gilbert's action marked a simple regularity. The cow is his private property, so the more of his cattle that graze on the pasture, the better it is for him. The pasture, however, is common property. This is why all potential losses will be shared by everyone. And since Gilbert's private profit will probably outweigh his share in the shared loss, it definitely pays for him to graze the next cow. And he should do it quickly, before someone else comes up with the idea. In fact, others did come up with the same idea, and did graze more cattle than the land could sustain. As a result, nature's supply for the ever-increasing consumption became unsustainable. The pasture turned barren and was taken over by weeds inedible for animals. The cows became puny and stunted, ceased to give milk, and finally died. By acting in their own self-interest, the commoners worked not only to the detriment of others, but also to their own detriment in the long term. To put it simply, they were cutting the branch they were sitting on. In 1968, Professor of Human Ecology Garrett Hardin put the subject back into spotlight with his article, The Tragedy of the Commons. By recalling Lloyd's work, Hardin delineated the issue of the tragedy of the commons, which consists in the fact that when people have free access to a shared resource, by acting rationally in their own self-interest, they cause the rest of society and themselves to suffer losses in the long run. This is because the institution of common property motivates people to abuse resources and at the same time to neglect their maintenance and renewal. He notes, "Ruin is the destination toward which all men rush, each pursuing his own best interest in a society that believes in the freedom of the commons. Freedom in a commons brings ruin to all." Let us try to pinpoint the root cause of the problem. Up to a certain point, the common resources are so abundant that anyone can use them freely without any adverse effects. For example, a pasture that can feed 50 cattle will not be made barren by 3 cattle, even if feeding is all they do. A single angler cannot hope to catch all the fish in a large lake, just as a small group of inhabitants of the Great Plains will not contribute to the decline of the American bison population. There is a turning point, however, at which nature cannot possibly restore such resources. A pasture, for instance, can only feed a certain number of animals during a given time. A lake can only sustain a certain number of fishermen and anglers each year before its fish population starts to diminish. And there is no such thing as an infinite bison supply on the Great Plains. At some point, the increase in the number of animals, fishermen, anglers, and hunters causes the land to suffer from overcrowding. Freedom of access to the common resources promotes a tendency for their excessive use and for the neglect of their maintenance and renewal. One contemporary example of the tragedy of the commons is high seas. According to the law, everyone has equal access to these waters. For example, everyone has the right to fish in the high seas. Given constant rise of population, modernization of fishing techniques, and other factors, nature just cannot sustain its output. The eponymous tragedy consists in the fact that the law encourages fishermen to catch as much fish as possible. In doing so, the law drives fishermen to catch unsustainable amounts of fish and thus to damage aquatic resources, instead of encouraging them to care about keeping the fish population at suitable levels. Are there any ways to avoid the tragedy of the commons? Yes, but there is no single universal cure that will work in all conditions. We can instead denote 3 general groups of solutions. Hardin suggested 2 of them. 1. Creating and selling property rights to scarce resources, which allows for a change in incentives and for exclusion of others from the use of said resources. And 2. Top-down regulations of the right to enter areas endowed with such resources. Later research by Nobel laureate Elinor Ostrom, among others, has shown, however, that there is one more group of solutions, namely 3. Bottom-up institutions. There are some examples that show under the right conditions, some communities were able to establish rules that allowed for a long-term and sustainable use of shared resources. Contrary to what has been implied by Hardin's work, people using a common resource are not necessarily condemned to repeat the tragedy of the commons. They can talk things through and create adequate institutions. Effective management of shared resources gets easier as more of the following conditions are met. It is easy to monitor resources and their use, and for the information thus gathered can be verified and understood at relatively low cost. Rates of change in resources, resource use population, technology, and economic and social conditions are moderate. Communities maintain frequent personal communication and dense social networks that promote mutual trust and encourage greater respect for established rules. The community can exclude outsiders at a relatively low cost from using the common resource. And resource users support effective monitoring and rule enforcement. We will endeavor to describe specific examples of such solutions and their effects in one of our next videos. You are more than welcome to visit EconClip. In the manners of feudal England, there were some
Okay, we're not watching twice. So the tragedy of the commons thing is was revolutionary when the guy brought it back in the late 60s, right? That was one of the precursors or crystallizing points for the environmental movements. And a few years later, we have the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act coming out of the Nixon administration. So as people are dealing with those parking problems, they're thinking about this. They're thinking about how to avoid the tragedy of the commons. And so our parking becomes this conservative engineering exercise about how to make sure that people can park in front of their destination and just walk into it. And that's what we're stuck with a lot of the Xerox planning that have come to us. I want to highlight the three solutions or 3 ways to avoid the tragedy of the commons. 1, suggesting to just privatize the resource so that it's one decision maker making a decision in the best interest. 2 was the top-down regulation. So somebody is forcing everyone to make those good decisions. And then the 3rd one is community decisions, which is somehow different than top-down regulation. I don't know.
Have you watched the next video? It said that it's a good
I
example
looked
of
for
those.
it. And
Yeah?
I couldn't find it.
Couldn't find it?
No, I think it.
Because that would be interesting to find out, because the bottom up one seems like it would be less city council and more school board. I don't even know. I don't even know what it would be.
This is parking, right? Well, but I think, but one of the things is when we're talking about parking, yes, part of this is the downtown. We're talking citywide though as well.
Mhm.
So it's not just downtown.
Right.
So it wouldn't just be like businesses. It's also private property owners that throughout the city.
So the analogy or the what you're trying to draw here is that parking is the common area.
Right.
But can only support obviously
So many cows.
so many cows.
Yeah.
So right. Due to the top-down approach.
And not only that, I mean, you're looking at it sort of in 2 different ways. So in one, one way you're looking at it is that the individual interest of the person owning the lot or building on the lot is going to build to New York, and they're not going to consider cars. They're going to put the skyscraper up without worrying about that. And so that's the commons, is that they're not creating it. They're not looking out for that communal common need. And then there's another one that I do touch on. But yes, the other way is what you're talking about, is here's all these spaces and there's only so many. And how are we going to avoid them being awful and they're being gridlocked on the streets as people just circle around looking for their crane to take them out to the top of it.
It's interesting, Ben. I'm thinking, and I keep going back to Leavenworth and how they have their parking set up and everything. They've got a couple of big parking lots that allow people to park, and then people have, if you walk the shop, basically. Granted, right now, we don't have that, but maybe that's something that we need to really take a look at.
The other thing,
I've only been to Leavenworth one time, and I didn't know what to expect, and I knew where I wanted to be, and just did the concentric circles. But I, as an outsider, didn't know if there was a parking lot that I should have gone straight to, knowing that I was going to walk. But then, as far as trying to plan ahead, that was one of the success stories of the parking survey, is because there's a formula, and I don't remember what the formula is, so that if you mandate a certain amount of parking and the utilization is less than 75%. All right, then when you look at the parking inventory through that lens, then you see there is no problem. Or it is, but you put this just raw numbers. This is your raw numbers. What's the utilization? If it's not being utilized, then you have asked for too much parking. But if it's find out that it's overutilized, then somebody needs to do something about parking. So I think we proved that our inventory is pretty good. I'm jumping ahead, though, right?
yeah, the other part of this is I just want to critique it. We went from some guy talking about puny cows to another guy saying, well, the way to avoid that is either to privatize all land or tell people what they have to do. Right. To some other economists now saying, well, actually, communal groups can form and do things that are good too.
But just because you have private land doesn't mean that you end up with extra cows. What they do with their extra cows that the other guy couldn't do?
And so, and then
Probably about more private land.
so it's not a perfect model, and this is something I want to hit on too, is something that our planning commission chair Jeff Breckel talks about that he learned from one of his professional mentors, that all models are wrong, some are useful. So it's all how you are looking at it and using the tool that's given to you. So the tragedy of the commons model is wrong, but can be useful too, and it was. It was definitely, there we go. It definitely impacted how people looked at parking. It impacted how Stevenson looked at parking. And so now I'm getting into our history when our current parking problem was created, or at least our parking problem before 2021 was created. So on the left, you have part of the promotional sales pamphlet that the city and the county and the powers that be in Skamania County put together when there was a competition to place a conference center in Washington on the western edge. That competition was established because of the Gorge Act legislation, set aside $5 million in order to build this conference center. And so they opened it up and said, okay, where should we build it? Stevenson put together something here. and said that. So I know you guys are all very astute and perceptive and can tell that's not what the lodge looks like now. But that's what they thought it might look like in the 1990s. Fast forward to November of 1990, we're doing the regulatory analysis of that, the environmental impact statements. We've got another mock-up, and it's still not what the lodge ended up looking like. Changed over time. This kind of has things in the photo. Looks even prettier. It was a busy time putting together this proposal, finding out that we got the $5 million, putting together the permitting and doing all the analysis and working with the developer to who's working on the actual architecture and getting going. And oh, by the way, we're also doing a downtown plan during this time. And in June of 1991, we've got a downtown plan going, and there's pedestrian and bicycle lanes component of the downtown plan, and we're doing a sewer plant replacement all at the same time. So very big flurry of activity, not unlike what it feels like we're going through right now. But they did do a downtown plan at that time, and it's had some analysis and recommendations that's incorporated the lessons from New York and the lessons from Houston and the how to avoid the tragedy of the commons. So our program that was put into place in 1994 based on the downtown plan, and I think it's it tried to avoid the traffic gridlock that we talked about as one of those problems that a lack of parking could have by privatizing that. By top-down regulation, requiring a certain number of spaces per square foot. There's nothing in our records that talks about why they chose those rates. So it's really based on, maybe I'll prompt you with the ITE.
Oh, could be. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So they analyze what these, like a suburban megachurch requires for parking. And so they say, okay, that's how many people go to a church of that. And we'll require that number of, that's what the square footage of the church is. And so we'll require this many spaces for a church of this size. Restaurant the same way. So we build an Applebee's in the suburbs. I think people are driving there and the spaces. So we've got an example over here of what our requirement is. So that's a 10 by 10 square.
I'm testing now.
Okay, something needs to turn off.
I hear sound.
Oh.
Okay, trying again. How's that?
I can definitely hear you.
Okay, and there's no feedback, so that's a good sign.
Mhm.
Perfect.
Oh, yeah, I disappeared. That's too bad.
Was it a good one?
It was a great one.
Ah,
No, you'll never know.
Okay,
We lost the slide.
Yeah.
well, but we can.
The lighting.
Are you still able to screen share though if our camera's not working?
May. Oh, maybe.
Yeah. Okay,
You
perfect.
can see it.
There we go.
Camera's just
All
on
right.
spot screen, but it's on screen sharing.
Okay. So
We're gonna start with a deep dive.
yeah. There we go.
By the way, that water doesn't look all that deep.
Okay. So again, behind you, you've got 100 square feet of territory. And that's what we require, one space for every one of those that a restaurant has.
Or any business, basically, right?
Any other businesses are either 200 or 400 or 800.
It depends on
Yeah,
the type of
depends on the
business.
type of business.
Okay,
And so
Customer facing, not customer facing. that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can imagine the engineers going through to say, all right, a 6-top table can fit there, and the average household size for the suburban community is 4.1, whatever. And so that's one car that's gonna arrive for that. And then somewhere
one car
along-
for that entire space.
somebody did analysis to come up with that. I guarantee that, the mayor in 1990s didn't.
Yeah.
So, that's the way it is. We don't know why they did that, but that's the 100 square feet. And that was for every inch of the building from 1994. It was a very conservative approach. It was a very intent on avoiding that tragedy, this unknown, all the development that's going to happen from the lodge and all the crazy stuff that's going on and activity that we have. Let's make sure not to screw this up. And so they created a system that was very stringent up front for new construction and then hands off. So build up whatever the parking is now for this building, and then we're not going to require more parking later on. You're not going to have to modify anything. Skipped over the one bullet point too about one of the other problems. So by requiring on-site parking, we privatize that problem. So now a lot owner is maintaining that they're going to keep it nice. It's going to be well paved and striped and everything's taken care of. So he's not going to have to do that in theory. All
Kind
models
of
are
like a
wrong.
big drain pond up on the heights.
All models are wrong. Some are useful.
With my outside voice.
We lived with that from 1994 until 2021. And we lived with people saying this doesn't work. This is stifling downtown developments. Let's solve this. So in 2021, we started to solve that. We reduced the rate for 3 different uses. We reduced how it applies to 7 different uses. And by that, I mean, instead of every inch of a building requires that, it's only the customer areas that require that. So the area.
So the kitchen and
The walk-in.
Yeah.
That doesn't
all that.
require those parking spaces anymore. So that takes out a lot of the requirement for new construction. It increased the opportunities for shared parking as far as how far away from the use it could be. And also the opportunities for off-street parking. So we went from being very stringent and hands-off to being still stringent, but still hands-off. Is it the right approach? Apparently it's not. We're still, we still have the parking problem, however it gets defined. We've been looking at that, what the parking problem is here, so off-street parking requirements, or the presence period competes with buildings for space. Downtown lots are too small, so if you're trading a parking space for lessable space inside of the building, it reduces your return on investments, and so there's no reason in investing. You're there. Perceptions do differ from realities. We did sort of a public opinion questionnaire, and the public thinks there's largely enough during the tourist season, during the off season, and not enough during the tourist season. So don't bother with the details there. Green means enough parking, red means we don't think there's enough parking. And so there's a lot of red on that. We think that there's not enough parking. Business owners are pretty evenly split. There's enough versus not enough for our customers to park.
Is that during tourist season or just during the
That
off
one
season?
was general.
General?
The bottom one was just general to those retailers, the businesses downtown. Is there enough? Half of them said yeah. Almost half said no. We did a point in time study in September 2021 that suggests that if there are parking problems, they're localized, as in within this one block face. But if you turn right, you can find your parking spot, and time limited, not often throughout the day. So again, there's a little schematic showing a lot of green on a map.
Is part of it been the whole thought process of our citizens, and that, you know, getting back to the, you know, I want to park right in front of the where I'm going to.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you say problem,
Well, that's
depends on who you're talking to.
exactly,
Some people say,
exactly.
there's not enough parking, there's not enough physical inventory. The other half of that is there's people that have looked at development down here and have found that their parking problem is you're asking me to provide too much. Right.
Okay.
That's their problem. Two
Okay.
different problems, right? But still grouped into the parking.
Mhm.
That's what's okay. What are we talking about?
Which then
Right.
stifles
What is
development.
parking problem? Okay.
So yeah, that little map at the bottom shows a lot of green. We know that it's green versus red because we started counting. We had an intern that helped us finalize this. So we counted the number of spaces that are along each block face downtown. We estimated the number of parking spaces in each private lot downtown. And then we reflected that back to those private lot owners and saying, this is what we counted. Does that sound right? And I said, yeah, or no, there's actually 2 more cars that can fit in there. So we upped the number by 2 and it comes out to about 1,500 spaces. Love those numbers that are easy to translate too. So that's one for every person in Stevenson.
1,055, we're 1,550. Oh, when you add them together, sorry, thank you, yeah.
Yeah.
I was only looking at the off street.
Yeah.
Need a longer nap.
And not only did we count the spaces, we also characterized them. We gave them different attributes. So 11 different attributes for on-street spaces and 9 for off-street spaces. This is where it's at. This is what it looks like in those areas. It should remind you of Pac-Man. This was part of the concept.
So
So
those are parking spaces.
the purple are off-street lots, and then the teal are block faces where parking could or could not be.
Okay.
There's, yeah, we collected a lot of data. Here's a lot of data that says, yeah, there's a bunch of spaces and there's only 18 that are ADA. in the core area, 31 total. But this is a fun one. So we collected data throughout 2 different days. Some in the morning and then in the afternoon. That's what it looks like.
Wow.
So green was. Well, explain the colors. Oh, sorry, there's something.
Yeah. So
That's utilization.
next.
Less than 25% utilization is the green.
Yeah. Jump there. So green is less than 25% utilization for us. Yellow is 25 to 55. Orange is 55 to 85. And red is 85 and above. Now that's different than what the guidance document had. They had their breaks a lot higher. When we applied those, it wasn't showing us anything. It wasn't showing us differences in block faces. So we expanded those out. But for them, yellow and green are you? I'm not going to get into that. But we had so few cars parked on different block faces that we had to come up with a different way to display the difference between block faces.
Can you show that, you run that graphic again, the animation?
Yeah.
Watch the time of the bottom.
If you don't want to walk, you park in the Russell Avenue to First Street area. First Street, Second Street. In that 2-block area.
You could park at your house and walk too.
We call Party Dave's house.
Mhm.
Yeah, everybody come park at Dave's house, yeah.
Or Christie's.
Yeah, right.
Parking out back.
You know, there's a lot of green.
What's that red? It's perpetual. Yeah, what is that part?
Where that?
On Railroad? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's down there.
Down
walking
on
down
Railroad Street.
Yeah. And it,
And then by the post office and by the income courthouse and whatever, like that.
Because you can't park there because of BN. Is that
Yeah.
why that's red?
it's red because you can't park there and BN was parked there.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
So it showed that it was occupied beyond its
Past this.
capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It started with 0 and ended with 2, so it's over full.
Exactly. So this is all just point in time data, right? It creates a model. We've got a model and we know what it was like on Thursday, the 16th of September of 2021. And we know what it was like 2 days later on a rainy Saturday in 2021. So great. It's data. It's more data than we've ever had in order to start looking at this. So we want to be able to replicate that study. It was fun putting that together. We did it with volunteers and our intern that we had there who's getting drenched on the Saturday.
But we also were very strategic in the volunteers that we picked. So like we had Van Pelt, Van Pelt was part of it. We still had DECA involved, right? Wasn't that still a thing?
No.
That's right.
Terry Sauer from the hotel.
And then the owner of the bookstore was there.
She didn't. No, Terry did from across.
So anyway,
yeah.
There was some thought into who was
Sure.
part of that volunteer.
Sure.
thing.
And so it helped us understand what's going on. And what's going on is there's not a lot of cars out there. The 85% rule is something that we're also handed down. This comes from a real parking. We're talking about parking. We're not talking about parking. There's a presentation we could do that's based on this high cost of free parking tome that some UCLA professor wrote, and he comes up with this, the 85% rule. And it's another like economic investment model saying that if the parking that you have is not being occupied, then you made a poor investment. 85% is the threshold where you should be reinvesting in more parking, but not until then. So If there's 15% of the parking spaces available, that's enough, and you're recouping your cost on that. Here, if it's orange, you should be thinking about how to add to the supply before you have the tragedy of no parking. But if it's green, then you're not realizing your past investments. You don't need to be making new investments in parking. So green kind of implies that it's good, but green is not good in this.
Well, there's gotta be a caveat to that, because if you have what else would you do with that space in front of the curb? Turn it into more street cars? I don't know.
Parklets.
You're right, there is a caveat. So this is how that applies to all hours, the peak demand. So every lot, every block face, if they were all occupied at their peak at the same time, this is what your downtown would look like. Still a whole lot of grade.
Right. There is, but again, it's public perception when you're driving through and you're trying, I want to go get bigger grill, and the whole street in front of there is blocked, and then you go up and, well, that's both sides are filled, and you can make one turn, well, then forget it. And it's like, we have a whole, you know, but I just know people do, they'll drive away.
Yeah, exactly. Though green is not necessarily bad either. It presents an opportunity to alleviate some of those red areas if we can get it signed and people directed to that, so they know it's easy to get to and are willing to walk. There's a parking reserve that we can use.
Right. Or
it's a parking reserve that can be used by future development on some of the underdeveloped lots downtown. So yeah, it just is what it is. 85% rule is a model, and it's wrong, and it can be useful too. Here is kind of the basis for how we might alter our approach. So we've got direction in the downtown plan that says go forward and reduce some of the parking minimums. We did some of that in 2021. And consider this fee in lieu system, and that's something that we'll look at too. We've started turning that into a draft parking improvement plan where we're identifying where new parking areas might be placed and what it would take to do that. So we've got several of those, and we can source more. We will be sourcing more to think about in the future. So returning back to this graph, we have the direction from the comprehensive plan to ease overnight parking, or I'm sorry, to keep looking at this. And so we're doing that. As staff, we're looking at easing the overnight parking prohibition where that applies downtown. So 2nd Street, Vancouver, Russell Street, you can't park overnight between the hours of 2:30 and 5:30. Looked at that and said we probably don't need that prohibition there always, and if there's going to be more demand for overnight parking in our downtown because of less on-site parking, then we need to solve that before that's a problem. So,
and what's I understand the optional fee in lieu of off-street parking, but what is that fee used for?
The addition to the parking supply.
So if we were to decide at some point the city wanted to purchase a piece of property, that fee would be used for that. Okay.
Or there's more to it than that. So Ben has what, 2 or 3 potential projects, right?
Right. We identified 5 to 8 conceptual projects. Say, okay, here's where areas where parking could be added or improved in some way. Had the engineers estimate what it would take to do that.
Divide that by the amount of parking spaces, you're going to realize there's your cost.
And so, yeah, we're looking at that. We'll calibrate that fee based on our parking improvement program. Sure. And that's something where right now it's just conceptual. They said, hey, engineer, we need something to help us understand this. That's where our planning commission lead on this, and Kazee will help organize the steering committee for that, or help get public perceptions about where those parking improvements really are needed and prioritize those so that we have that. Here's what we're gonna do, and here's how many spaces, and
If you extend, this is what you're gonna pay per parking space based on the model that we, or a project that the city has identified, you have a certain finite amount of time to actually parlay that money into the project.
Right.
It's not just we needed a number for this imaginary project. But no, you have committed to going down a trail to a parking project based on charging someone per space.
Yeah. So they get a return for their money too. Sure.
yeah, and so if we put all that together and you guys adopted, it would take us out of this bottom right-hand quadrant and put us into something that's still kind of stringent, a little bit less so, but much more involved, and gives us the ability to adaptively manage based on the actual demand and need. So now we've got a budget that's put together that's just for this resource or solving this problem, and we can solve that problem with that budget. Okay. And that's something that we hadn't had. As we're having all our own discussions here about parking, there's a huge movement nationally to just end parking minimums totally. And so Strong Towns is a nonprofit agency that's has a lot of really good thoughts, and they just want to end them. They want to say, just be totally lax and totally hands off, and let privatize all of it, privatize the whole problem, and let the market deal with that problem.
Kind of like when you go to a concert and you got this sea of vehicles and law enforcement just kind of stands back and says, let them figure it out.
Or somebody opened up their front yard.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's out there. We'll evaluate that too. Early on, we think that's not the solution for Stevenson, because we don't have that private developer who's going to build a garage that's going to respond to our tragedy.
The ROI is so insane. Obviously, we'll ever see a garage, so it's going to be turning over valuable real estate or a parking lot.
Well, the Strong Towns focus is also more on not being car centric. Also, so it's not to build a garage, it's to just not drive there. So use walk, bike, alternative transportation. So it's to be right. So it's not car
Build
centric.
homes close to where people want to be.
Exactly.
Where it is.
Yeah.
The way it is.
Mhm.
There. So
It is one size fits all. That's a given.
mhm. Right.
To create more of that community.
Yeah, that YouTube link that's on there is right now it's just a placeholder. They're coming out with some big video tomorrow for what that is. So I'll be watching that tomorrow. But
Who's coming out with some new video?
the Strong Towns organization
Oh, yeah.
is promoting it in advance.
You're being facetious, but when we've got a state highway running right through the middle of downtown, it's hard to be non-car centric when there's an artery going right through the heart of town.
And as a tourist
Right.
reliant
People
place.
come here in their car.
Right, there's only so much of that you can do. Yeah.
They are working on more car-free gorge itineraries. So, but it isn't going to get rid of the cars.
So you have one example of a possible project on the Ash
Mhm.
alley. Do you have any that are related to Russell? Because that seems like the one place that does seem to be highlighted in red.
Yeah, that's what I noticed too.
No.
No.
Especially down by the post office.
Wayfinding.
Oh, wayfinding to direct people to
Yeah.
parking.
And so, yeah, we weren't able to identify any spots there on Russell.
Did we
at
talk
all.
about potentially like going to one lane downhill and then turning one side of the road into diagonal? We can stack a few more.
Yeah, it,
And on
Lots
the
of-
weekends, there's the courthouse parking lot
Yes.
that is mostly empty.
So that's an easy walk.
There's some low hanging fruit too, from their parking studies. Some changes to striping. And narrowing up some places where there's really big, entrance into. Like for instance, the chevrons on that side of town, really big entrance on the one side. We just added curb on the spot, but it's not by Russell. There's a couple up on Vancouver outside of the courthouse that could be, if we neck down some of the entryways to the county courthouse. Might be a spot realize there. Some small guys.
yeah, and part of the approach too is changing some of the information that's on our wayfinding signs. So to have the parking P underneath the courthouse saying, okay, here's where there's going to be parking. Have the parking P going down to it, yeah, as well as the bathroom. So green is not necessarily bad if you can get people to use that and spread it out. So that's part of what we're doing to this.
I guess the other reason that I think about Russell is I don't know what the owner of that empty lot right there next to Hotel Stevenson is thinking, but that seems like a spot that could use some incentive to build at like a perfect infill location. And if anything of any foot traffic at all gets put there, it's only going to make.
That used to belong to Bruce Klinger
The
way
downtown
back in the day.
plan. Okay, a lot of the way the communities are solving the parking problem right now, it already came up. So you've got a satellite lot on the edge of town, and you park there and then you walk in. So Leavenworth, there's really good examples in Cannon Beach where that's the case. And so, that's the model we're given right now, and maybe it'll prove to be wrong too. Our downtown plan identifies 3 conceptual. So one is here, similar to the Ash Alley one that we showed, but bigger within there.
Right there behind right next to the pharmacy.
Behind the pharmacy in that area. The second is over here by the Columbia Realignment Project, between that and the hardware store. And then the third would be on A&J owned property on that side of the gas station. So here's some unused space that might serve your satellite parking needs.
What about Burtonville?
Could
Out
they
there in
looked
that
at that?
triangle.
Do you know how many times that question's been asked for a variety of reasons?
They looked
Oh,
at,
I can imagine. Yeah, I know.
they looked at it differently, as that's prime waterfront space, not
Prime waterfront.
yeah. We're not spending any money yet. We're sussing out options. So
But it's because I don't know if we're in the in-between spot, because I go to Cannon Beach and I was enticed to go there on Labor Day weekend. I'll never go again, even with all of the satellite parking
Beach
space.
on Labor Day.
Oh, Labor Day.
Okay.
Driving around and driving around to the point where it's like I stopped, held up traffic, kicked the girls out of the car in front of the candy shop and just drove around.
Yeah.
Call me when you're ready and I'll be right there. But I
Yeah.
could not find a place to park. Now, it's not always like that. And we're not at that part now, or even on Labor Day, that we have that big of a parking problem. So it is a tough sell to say, well, then just park down there and walk. Well, if it's that full part of Big River Grill, maybe they're too busy to go there anyway. Yes, so there's lots of swirling doubt about it, but it's all, there's the data right there. The perception is
Right. How does public transit play into it? And I'm just sitting here thinking about. When we went to where's Disney World? Orlando. Okay, when we went to Orlando, that's how we got around. I mean, it was you get on the bus and off you go. I don't know.
there's beauty in a small town, and when there's like, Uber, no, not as much.
Yeah.
Bus, not from one out of town, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Trolley.
I love the idea
Oh,
of
wouldn't that be
goes
cool?
up.
Have a trolley that just circles the
route.
town.
It's got a route, man. Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding,
Well,
ding.
like that, I mean, we're thinking out loud that the tractor that they pull out for the fair,
Yeah,
that has 2 cars behind it.
Yeah.
just with the long row of benches, you just, it goes real slow, you just hop on and. Maybe here's.
In the summertime? In the summertime.
Well, it's probably not the tourists that are the ones that are complaining,
No,
though,
right.
right?
No.
It would
It's
be,
the people who live here.
you'd want to go up the hill, get residents and come down.
Right, that's what I'm saying, we had to have a route of some kind. Yeah.
If the city invests in a bunch of e-bikes. Spend a lot on e-bikes.
Yeah.
They get deserted in the middle of 14.
Yeah. Or convince the lodge to invest in a bunch of e-bikes.
Right.
Yeah.
Send people in time.
Yeah, they, my son drives the van every once in a while, they take advantage of the free van ride,
Oh,
Just
there
call
again,
it, yeah,
it was from the
Mhm.
lodge.
wherever you wanna go downtown.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the takeaways I wanted you guys to come away with before we start really presenting the solutions to you for this are parking still a new problem. It's not old, it's not something humans have been dealing with forever, and said it multiple times, so all models are wrong, some are useful.
Well, and it's not gonna go away. Even if we decide to do something, it's gonna morph and it's gonna be constant change to it.
Yep, so there's no right solution, there's only a best possible one for our time. We'll develop our best possible solution based on our understanding of the current supply. Observe usage for a couple days in September and more if we can put that together at sometime before it comes back to you. And our best possible solution is going to implement the downtown plan and be comprehensive. That's something the council that was underscored for the council when we looked at it in 2021 is we were talking about reducing the parking requirement for new development. And the public that came in said, yeah, cool, but why can't I park overnight on the street? And we're like, well, look at this good thing we're doing though, hold on.
Because they said back in 1980.
Yeah. So we're being comprehensive. We're looking at that as a component of this and how it plays into the long-term parking needs of the city after these changes might happen. So it'll come to you. We're using, again, the Planning Commission and Kazee is their representative that'll help us evaluate the different parking improvement projects. I'm sure there's room on that committee if any of you want to get in on that sort of deep dive.
So is there any room for discussion on, because are there standards for setback in the house and how long your driveway should be, and so you could theoretically pack so many cars into the driveway? Too much of an offshoot.
That's, we've got those standards in place in a couple zones. Hadn't considered bringing it into this discussion.
No need, but that's the part where people, when they come downtown and I can't walk. Well, actually you can. You just don't want to walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's where the good daddy parks everybody. Kicks everybody out at the door and goes and parks and walks back in the rain. You're welcome.
Good daddy.
I get a pat on the back and an extra beer for doing that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
This person did not belly flop like our original person.
Right.
And they're coming up for air.
Right.
Just like all of you.
I wouldn't be smiling.
So I guess
It's
this
good
is-
information.
yeah, you haven't trotted out, like you said, you haven't trotted out the next phase, but kind of teed up for these discussions are coming. And these are the elements that need to be in the mix when we start working on ideas.
So have we, I know we did it in September because I was working down at the port when we did the survey and they were counting the spots down there and, you know, it's always a discussion down there between employees and people coming in and not, you know, where we can park and how far away we have to park and all that kind of stuff. But we need, like, September is, I mean, it is still a busy season, but are we looking at maybe trying to look at different times of the year too?
Yeah.
Because I know it's not easy to do, like, we don't have the staff to send people out and do it once a month or something like that, but organizing this in a, you know, the peak Dog Mountain season versus
So this,
something
the
else.
last study was, I wouldn't call it peak, it was off peak, but it was a good start.
No,
So then that was the next question is, do we do the next survey on a festival day, like a Blues and Brews are in town? On, when we know that there's gonna be an attraction or an attraction, or is it Labor Day or Memorial Day? At this point, Labor Day. When you know that it's, you know, another potential, but are we really known for drawing a bunch of
Right, that
tourists
would
in on
show
Labor
up.
Day? Or is it just a random weekend in July?
And February.
right, and the off season as well, yeah.
So yes, we have data points for 2 days in September of 2021.
Mhm.
It's not definitive, but it's informative.
Absolutely.
And the graphical data is very enlightening.
Creating a ongoing monitoring
It goes
program
across.
would help you budget and spend the budget and invest in those parking improvement options.
Well, and then, you know, because a lot of it is perception. It's like Facebook, you yell into the vacuum, it's all it can be perception. So one of the questions was, as a business owner, do you feel that you're doing a fine job of you and your employees parking off away from prime spots? Oh yeah, we do a great job. Do you think that other business owners are doing a good job
No.
with their employees parking away so that other people know? No, absolutely no. Not so much.
Right, well, and it was interesting, if you look at like in front of the courthouse on the top side, on school, you know, on the school street side up there. It was red quite a bit. I dropped my kid out for school. And you know, when it's rainy or when he's not feeling good, whatever, I drive instead of walk. And I go by there and there's 3 or 4 cars that are out there all the time. Those are employee cars. It's not. So they're there all day. So those aren't actual spots that we're getting used. That's spots taken by, you know, county employees. And
That's because they're told by the county.
I only highlight that because that's, I know those, like, those 3 spots or 4 spots are always, and the county tells them to do not park next to buildings so people can come in. I get that. I'm just saying that some of the red zones aren't even. It's not because we have a bunch of people coming to eat that are parking up there.
But then there's other nuance too, because Judith had a great point. You know, we've got a neighbor with a residential house that has a driveway. And yet there's 2 or 3 cars on the curb in front of her business. So now someone that, again,
Sure.
it's okay with that,
Right,
but
right.
they live there and they have the space. I would like my customer to park there. So.
Mhm.
it's
Oh, no, it's very much,
massaging,
yeah.
It's not, this is, we can all blame it on perception. but-
I find it interesting, the ADA. The lack of ADA parking.
Mhm. I pulled the gobbledygook slide up again to help convey that we did collect a lot of information too. So core area was defined as these certain block faces downtown and some of the lots within there. We counted the cars on those block faces. We also did a turnover study. So we said, is that the same car that's parked in that space or not? And so for Russell, 2nd Street, 1st Street, we have that information, whether it's turning over or not turning over.
So yes, it was red the entire time, but with the same car.
Yeah. Interesting.
On 0 on curbside ADA.
in downtown. Staff's being thorough in this, we're being comprehensive. Some of the solutions that we're kicking around involve adding to that and addressing some of our other issues. So people complain about sight distance at Russell and Second Street. What if we made that first spot an ADA spot? And so it's going to remain vacant more often. The sight distance is going to be there less.
But there's a fair amount of buffer between the last parking space, like in front of Bloomsbury, if you're heading down Russell, you can fit a car in there, but the parking stripe indicates that is not a parking space, but you can. So they,
You might be hanging out a little bit, but yeah,
but
depending on what kind of car you got.
massaged, so you
Go.
got an ADA spot right there, right in front of us.
Yeah.
Right in front of the bank. So
This is my first workshop, so is this, how are these usually? How's that been going?
Like this.
Good. I've been good.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Not thinking about Zoom, but you know,
Right.
I workshop myself.
It's been
Technical challenge.
They've all been
Fine.
and they've been hit on the things that we bring up, and so.
a lot of the discussions that we have at regular city council meetings is stuff like this. Okay, we gotta tee it up, we gotta talk about it, and now we've done our homework as a group.
Yeah.
Right.
But we haven't touched at all about the Title 10 stuff that we are proposing to change.
No, this isn't. Yeah, I don't know.
Just early intentions will ease that overnight burden. Keep it where it exists. We're going to extend an overnight burden to some areas where it makes sense to, like First Street, which didn't exist in 74 or 6 when that was adopted. So yeah, it doesn't make a whole bunch of sense, but there's other things that we're doing in there too, or kicking around proposing. We are processing this through based on our informed consent training. So having our thorough technical review and analysis and identifying the potentially affected interests and the issues that they might have, and doing that outreach in advance before we come out with anything specific for you guys.
And that's assuming that they're going to respond.
Yeah, junk vehicles is another thing we touched on. You know, before I'm sure you guys getting a lot of calls about junk vehicles, like. There's there's not homeless, but there's a broke down vehicle in front of from my business, and it's making people not want to shop here. So we're doing some of that stuff. But Corey's constantly doing laps, leaving using vehicle stuff. So it's like cleaning up that ordinance, so it makes sense.
Loading zones on the street are something where there's internal conflicts within our code. So in Title 12, Carolyn can issue loading zone decisions. In Title 10, City Council has to do this according to this process. We're cleaning that up. We intend to clean that up.
So I think we're gonna get a request for one. My understanding is that it's already been granted previously, but no data documentation is being granted, so I'm trying to figure out what that process is going to.
I agree in principle to the loading zone, but then it's one less parking spot. Then it kind of like 88, it's rarely used, but it's good to have. It's like I could see loading zone from before.
Yeah.
Like that.
Having a time frame.
Yeah. It's significantly shorter. 8 to 10.
Yeah, like first thing in the morning,
This is definitely
6 to 8. You know, if you want to get stuff into your business,
Right.
Do it before all of the heavy traffic starts.
Yeah, I mean, and it does make sense because it's really a safety thing, because what ends up happening is they have double parking.
Yeah.
They don't have one. And so
Yeah.
There's good reason to to do it and to allow it. Just again, the question of who and where and how we be fair about it.
Yeah, drive into downtown Portland sometime at 5 o'clock in the morning. Look how many delivery trucks are sitting there and they're,
Cause I got a parking ticket, cause I didn't realize I was in a loading zone, but when I got back, I looked, there's like 3 or 4 different signs. You think, then you look at the calendar. I think I checked all the. I
It'd be
think.
very confusing. So that, yeah, that would be. Want to make sure we're doing the right thing. And making sure it's clear.
We have a resource, information resource about when to consider and not consider.
Right.
yeah.
And then this study would be an interesting one to even for public, like people complain I hear it all the time about, well, it's just not enough parking, but there absolutely is. There's just not enough parking literally in front of the front door. And I don't even know how you would fix that.
Yeah.
Like you can't stack cars, you can't stack
Valet.
enough cars in front of,
There's
right,
so
in
many
valet
parking
parking.
spaces, you picked a busy time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though, but that's the complaint, and the complaint isn't, it's just not realistic, it's not supported by data, it's just a feeling.
Yeah.
So we gotta work on changing public perception, maybe. In some, I don't even know necessarily the answer, I'm just saying that it's not a lack of spots, we don't need to put 2 parking garages in town to make it so it's better. They can already park that far away, they're just not wanting to, so. They, as in everybody.
And it is about feeling too, in a totally different way. So A&J often considers themselves the public parking lot for Stevenson because people will park there and then
Sure.
run off to do whatever. It may be as far away from A&J to their final destination or farther away than going down somewhere on First Street to park. But because A&J has this activity and it's a place where things are hopping and you have good thoughts about, you park there.
Mhm.
When you're off on the derelict end of First Street, you don't want to be there. You don't want to park there. You'd rather walk farther parking at A&J.
Right.
I'm thinking about public perception, right? What if we had some signs somewhere that said, "Get your steps in, park around the corner," or
Right. Put a
earn
program
your
in,
ice cream,
Yeah.
tonight, like. park
Don't be a
First Street.
slug, walk.
Yeah.
There's
Exactly.
gotta be somebody who's done that though, right? It is absolutely public perception. Do some kind of marketing campaign to make people like, all right,
When Russell Street,
there is plenty of parking.
Yeah.
when we were gonna
Let's
close
get out.
Russell Street for the remod, and then when COVID hit, obviously a lot of that went out the window because there was no concern, but we found a line of signs that were really like clever twists on a phrase that I can't think of any of them now.
Getting diggy with it.
Yeah. Yeah, so they can, and the next thing you know, it's on Facebook.
Right. Yeah, don't be a slug, park around the corner. Or maybe, maybe even give like, I don't know, like $5 vouchers to, did you park on First Street? Here's your $5 voucher to.
Well, the SDA did a
dessert.
pretty good job about doing like a walking tour, like picture spots throughout town. So if you're waiting for a table or something like here, you can go, here are the places here's a walking map of where you could take cool pictures while you wait. So you can do something like that too.
And yeah, they're a great partner to put that message out there, have developed that message. They're a great partner for a lot of things. So this conceptual plan here was Kelly's idea, actually. And so that's a two-phase project. One is just to get some volunteers in there to put that in on the work at the pharmacy and put that in there. And then a future phase could be to clean it up.
What are these drawings on the right?
Ash Alley. The existing.
A retaining wall.
That's where you come with your tractor and you dig it out.
Boy, howdy.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's right.
here's the paved area of Ash Alley, and then there's this slope that just is grass-ish. It's not irrigated or anything, so changes with the season. And then there's the gravel parking lot up top for
And
the
right-
pharmacy.
Right behind that vehicle is the pharmacy, right? Is that where you're
Yes,
looking?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the backside, yeah.
And so
So you're looking east.
formalizing that parking lot a little bit to stripe that so that
Yeah.
Better utilize that.
better
one, sure.
utilize that one.
So is that
Creating a
like
reserve
right
down
now,
there.
is, who owns that? Is that the pharmacy's parking spot?
Yeah, and that's why the SDA would be pioneering that project. We're working with you as a business
Mhm.
downtown to help everyone else out with this.
Gotcha.
For part.
Does Jack Clifton own that whole lot
Yes.
where Meagers used to be?
Oh, well, I don't know where it was. I mean, they're right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who would park in the, who would park in the pharmacy lot though, and walk to,
The SDA's focus is on locals, and so they'd be getting that message out to, as they see fit.
wouldn't you rather park on First Street? and just walk up there? Yeah,
It would be better if the SBA took that whole lot and redid it. The gravel part too,
Well, but we've got,
Depper Park.
we're actively working on realigning Columbia and developing.
Yeah,
new
yeah,
spots,
right.
So.
Yeah,
Yes.
So have you guys seen the part of the, you know, the aspirational parking on Seymour? You can kind of see it in that graphic there. We're abandoned Seymour. And then the north and south, where you would, you know, enter on to First or Second, just become driveways into a parking lot. So the
Oh.
existing parking lot would stretch over like behind where the pizza place is.
Mhm.
It would involve, you know, getting into that little house right there, but turn that into a mid-block parking, well, mid-block. And then Seymour is just a driveway on both sides.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You can kind of see it.
There's a little White House. in there.
This area right in there. So conceptually, the downtown plan says, what if we did abandon Seymour there next to the pharmacy? And a new street were developed here, continuing Rock Creek Drive. So that when you get, when you come from Rock Creek Drive, you're looking down toward the gorge wall. All the way through that corridor.
Mhm.
And people like Russell. Well,
Yeah,
like
it's
that, let's
easier.
do more of that.
Mhm.
There's an opportunity to do more of that.
Mhm.
And then with that sort of change, having the buildings tight to that new street, parking reserve behind.
Like flight. Probably what you heard on the
Right. It'd be-
tone a while ago. Just saying.
Any other thoughts?
A lot to think about and a lot to. Yeah,
So how would, how could council help with helping you guys or helping I mean, whatever the steps for us, is this, because this is important and this is this kind of stuff is the reason that I wanted to be involved in this. So what, is it something that we just wait for the next step, the next presentation from the, you know,
hire 5 more people for you.
plans from the- like, what are we? Are there next steps for us, or are we just gonna go, okay, we'll wait and see what solutions are presented, and then we talk about those, or?
There's definitely an opportunity for one or two of you to join the steering committee. At the planning commission level. We are, like I said, doing the informed consent process for this one. So doing our reasonably thorough professional analysis of the problem and generating a range of solutions. Yep. And then doing the outreach based on the actual needs for this project. So as we're looking at this, the needs for this or negative, what could go wrong? Part of it is changing the on-street parking dynamics. And so if we're extending it to new areas, that could be a problem. So we'll be doing that outreach to those new areas to say, look, this is why we need to do this. Anyway, what can council do? You can give us upfront, next to the idea of a parking fee in lieu or not. Because if you're that's not gonna be something that you pursue, and we aren't gonna do it.
Why put any
Have to
energy
be
into it?
on this.
It would seem to me like the parking fee in lieu of would take a long time to generate enough in order to put it towards a project. That's just,
For example, Artbliss wants to expand. By our current regulations, they are required to provide parking. There is no parking on the curb, or there's some up top, but they're out of space.
Yeah.
So we would like to build, you want us to have additional parking, what can we do? That's when the city comes in and says, well, we have this program we're standing up. Or city council says, meh, figure it out. That's
which
the whole
then,
idea is that they would still park on the curb, but that's supposed to be for everybody, not just your place.
yeah. But which also then stifles growth.
Right.
Could, the potential
Yeah.
for doing that.
That's
So the
That's
back
what
to
I'm-
Ben's, X and Y.
Yes,
So we're gonna back off on the stringent part of it, but understand that there's gonna have to be there might be some reckoning later. So, yeah, if you guys we think that, turning over public parking at the curb is good for development, because it is, then that takes the pressure off of Tom. He expands and we've got that confidence in, energy in our downtown. So if that's what if that's the way you're leaning, then we'll go, sweet.
Yeah.
But don't forget, it's gonna come back.
oh, yeah,
Well, I mean, it's gonna come back, but realistically, yeah, it's gonna come back. Yeah, there can be a few more spots in whatever business expands or grows or gets put in. There's gonna be a little bit more need, but if 85% of our parking spots are used less than 25% of the time, I mean, that eventually that may be an issue, but do we even have enough space for business to expand enough to make it an issue? Is there even enough space down there in downtown for enough new businesses to go in that are gonna bring enough people to make it so we don't have parking spaces?
So one of the things that we're pushing for, not pushing for, but one of the things that we're looking at for the realignment of Columbia is mixed use. And so that's more residential. And with less parking restrictions, that's more overnight parking on the street. So it's not that cyclical.
It's not a 2-hour
business.
lunch. with
Right,
Right,
My car might not move for 2 years.
right. Well, and same with Artbliss. I mean, if
right.
it's an overnight stay.
Right.
So it's a changing of the parking dynamic, because again, it's not just that daytime business,
Mhm.
so.
We have not done those sort of future projections, total build out at this many stories, this many units to.
Right, that's my
How
thought
does
is
it
just
fit
like,
into that?
it
15
will,
spaces?
it could be an issue, but maybe it never will be, based on we only have a finite amount of space in Stevenson. There's only so much.
As you look at it now, but looking at, this aspirational vision.
Right.
If Rock Creek extends through, you have potentially 6 new businesses with 6 new apartments. Columbia gets realigned, same thing. That's gonna be more need for parking, but then also there's gonna be some static parking.
Right.
Or the empty lot on Russell gets retail, office, residential.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that there won't be an issue. I'm just saying we need to look at, maybe we're spending our energy really, really focusing on making sure that we make people pay for their parking spaces and have enough back spaces, when really that's not even, I mean, just people need to be willing to park on First Street and walk up to Big Brook Grill. Or,
Well, one of the things too, in the evenings, are we well lit? Or are we lit enough? Do we have a sense? The way we are currently set up, do we have a sense of safety for
Safety,
people that
absolutely.
are walking around?
Mhm.
You know, I think that plays into it as well.
oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, and like,
But if that was our focus, where if we're saying, okay, not necessarily finding a spot for 35 more parking spots, we need to actually, is there enough lighting on the spots that we have? Does no one want to park on First Street on the backside?
Because
It's feels like
dark.
it's scary to go over
Yeah.
there.
right,
yeah,
If that's the reason, then we change that and we already alleviate some of our problem.
Right.
Maybe it's a different direction, it's a different approach to it.
well, and so to use Tom as the example again, maybe Tom is paying for not necessarily another parking spot, but he's paying for signage or lighting to better utilize the existing parking.
Mhm.
We
Another
can,
thing that keeps coming up, I don't know when you ever even addressed it, is not sure what the hardware is dealing with that empty spot they've got back there. That could be, Tom could have an agreement with that.
Who owns the hole on the east side of Columbia Hardware? I call it the hole. That's where one of our deputies backed into. So,
split ownership,
huh?
split ownership.
Is that
Some-
split ownership?
Yeah, some is Louis, some is the Stacy's.
I thought they own most of that, but there's a. Well, not, you know what I'm saying?
Okay,
I really enjoyed this.
well, this taking the pressure off, it really just workshop it.
Yeah.
So that when it does come to us, it's gotta kind of got your head wrapped around it, you know what kind of questions to ask, you know what's coming.
If you wanted to organize a next round of usage study, we've got our volunteer pool that went into the first one who can train you, and I can train you to do that and go out and have cars too. I don't have the space to organize that effort, but that's something that it counts on
Partner
here.
with the SBA and that too,
Mhm.
get some volunteers for that,
Mhm.
just need some bodies.
Well, my wife wants me to get steps, so maybe I ought to volunteer.
There's a lot of steps to be had. We were sore. Alex was our intern. We were sore.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
I'm volunteering Dave for that.
Appreciate that, Christy. Thank you.
Meeting adjourns, 7:44. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ben, for putting it together.
Good.
Bye.
Good
Bye,
presentation.
Christy.
Bye-bye, Christy. Very good presentation.